Welcome to my sewing room. The rest of the family calls it the kitchen. Last week, I made a dinosaur dress out of 2 large thrifted bed sheets, and I posted it a bunch because I was very excited about it. But I didn't actually film making it because I was trying to figure out how to do the split side thing, and I was getting a little frustrated by it. So I didn't actually film any of it, and now a lot of people asked for a tutorial, like a lot of people. So we are going to make a second split side dinosaur dress, but this time it won't have dinosaurs on it. And this time I'm going to film it so you guys can actually see what I did. First things first, what even is a split side dress? Well, to be short, a split side dress is one in which the front and the back are split. They actually only connect more down in the skirt. Mine connect a little past the pockets over here. The back laces up. I used ribbon loops and lacings to tie it. And the front actually has a long piece to wrap around the back and tie. And this means that a split side dress is super adjustable and it'll adjust with weight fluctuations or other body changes over time. I also put ties at the top of this particular split side dress, and I did that because it lets you have more adjustability in the straps. Ties also make it so this particular dress would be friendly for someone who is nursing a baby. My husband and I have 2 children. I nursed both of our babies for nearly 2 years each. Now everything that I make happens to be nursing friendly because if my husband and I are blessed to have another child and I am blessed to be able to nurse him or her, I want to continue wearing the things that I make. I don't want to have to put everything into a closet somewhere because I am unable to nurse a baby while I wear it. I want to keep wearing the things that I've made that help me feel like me. That was a good thing for the postpartum mental health. But tangent aside, split side dresses are popular because of the massive amount of adjustability and ways you can customize them. If you're interested in exploring the concept of split side garments more fully, other people have done it way better than me. Please check out the Stitchery. Charlie, I believe, has done so many videos on the potential of split side garments. Dresses, skirts, pinafores. I think she did split side pants. Like, please go check her out if this concept interests you further, because she's done so much like deep dive work on the idea already. I watched a ton of her videos to be able to figure out what I'm doing here, like just my goodness. But how do we actually make the dang dress? Well, I need to bring you over to the measurement board. We're gonna make this dress from the top down pretty much, starting from the bodice. And in order to make our bodice pattern pieces, we're gonna need to take some measurements. So this is what our bodice pieces are going to look like once we actually like cut the dang things out. So we're gonna start by measuring from about where we want the points to sit. I'm just gonna measure on the dress that I already made. And we're gonna go like over and down to about an inch or so past the waistband measurement, because seam allowance, we got to keep in mind that seam allowance exists. And I get about 12 inches. 12 inches is what I'm going to write down for this line here, because I want that point part to be 12 inches tall. This is also the same measurement for this line here on the back bodice, where the neckline kind of ends, where we're going to put the ties. On me, I want this to be about 12 inches tall. Because I'm not doing a V-neck on the back bodice of this dress, this measurement also is the measurement where the fold in the fabric is. So I'm gonna mark that down too. 12 inches. There we go. Both the front and back bodice will be cut out on the fold of the fabric. So everything will be symmetrical, hopefully. Unless your fabric is super slippery like this microfiber was, I'm sorry. Next, we need to measure where these points actually go. And admittedly, this can be a little bit more of a guesstimate, but I'm going to measure in between these 2 points and I get about 8 inches. So since we're working on the fold, we can split that in half, get 4 inches. I'm gonna write that down at the top of our V-neck. That should be about 4 inches. And then because the back is based off of the front, this part across the top here should also be about 4 inches wide to get the back bodice ties lining up with the front bodice ties. Then we just need to finish off our V-neck by figuring out how deep of a V we actually want. Now on this fabric, I only made like a 3-inch little triangle there. And you can see here, 3 inches, it lines up with where these ties are. So it might look like a deeper V than you initially cut because of things like seam allowance and stuff. So do keep that in mind. I'm going to keep a 3-inch measurement here for myself personally. So I'm gonna finish off this little triangle here with 3 inches, and that'll tell me about where I need to cut actually cut the V-neck. Next, we need to measure our waist to get a bunch of like waistband type measurements. So on me, at my waist, I get about 32 inches, which, you know, makes sense for me. It's a comfortable measurement. I can like move around in it a bunch. So that works for me. Half of 32 is 16 inches. Oh, but for the back bodice, since we are lacing it in the front, we don't actually want it to fully come around because that doesn't give us enough space to actually like lace anything up. We want it to like stay to about here. So instead of 32 inches, I'm going to plan for the back bodice being more like, let's see, maybe like 28 inches instead. 28 inches, which means the whole total length here, maybe we'll go up here. 28 divided by 2 is 14 inches. So this whole distance here is going to be 14 inches long. No, you know what? We'll do 15 because seam allowance. I always forget seam allowance, so I need to try to remember to add it into things more. Even though we don't actually have a side seam, we do want to know the side seam of the garment. Why do we care about the side seam measurement? We want to worry about that for coverage sake. I like to have a more traditional arm side type height here, but if you drop this curve real fast down to the waist, you might get like less coverage on your v-neck, and maybe that's what you want. That's totally fine. I don't care. I'm just letting you know that this is how the math works out. This side seam will be about 1/4 of the way around our waistband measurement. For me, a waistband of 32 inches, divide in half to get 16, which will be 1/2 of the waist, so like the full back or the full front. Divide in half again to get 1/4 of my waistband. The side seam measurement here should only be about 8 inches total. The 8 inches would be from the middle here around to about here. And then how tall do I want that side seam? Measure from arm side height-ish down to my waist. We get about 8 inches as well. So I want this measurement to be 8 inches here. As you can see, this bottom here is 8 inches. This part's only 4 inches. I did not draw this to scale. I am sorry. This also means that our side seam for this back bodice is going to be 8 inches there, 8 inches there, because my measurements are the same. Now we technically have all the measurements that we need to cut out our bodice pieces. This long tail on the front piece, I'm just gonna cut to the edge of my bed sheet. It's always easier to take away fabric than it is to add fabric. So I'm gonna start by making that tie kind of absurdly long and see how I like it on me. If I would like to guesstimate measure a good length for me, I would take my measuring tape, put it on like the front fold where the front fold would be, wrap it around to the knot, make a little loop-de-loop, whoop, for my knot, and then hold it down to like where I want the ties to end. And that says about 32 inches. So I would, from this fold, make this line 32 inches long and then taper everything into each other. That means we're done with the measurements. Now we can go to my kitchen floor and actually cut out some fabric. Welcome to the kitchen floor. It is time to cut out our bodice pieces based off of these measurements here. I gotta transfer these measurements onto the fabric and then cut out the back bodice and front bodice and the back lining and front lining. To do this, I'm going to use the pillowcases, which came with this bed sheet. And even though I put them in the same dye bath as I put the sheet into, the pillowcases dyed ever so slightly differently. So I'm going to use them to make the lining of the bodice and hopefully the pockets too. The part I'm chopping off right here is going to be used for the shoulder ties. Then it's time to mark out and cut out the back bodice. Now's the part where I remembered that I forgot to actually measure how wide I want my lacing panel to be for the back panel that wraps around. So I'm going to go like 4 or 5 inches up, and I'm just going to mark that from my long waistline edge on the bottom, go up like 4 or 5, probably 5 inches because seam allowance, and mark that point as my like lacing stop ending bit. So we're back to actually cutting out the back bodice this time. I can probably use this to help line my front bodice for the ties to make sure that the ties are the correct color. And then it's time to mark and cut out the front bodice. I'm also cutting the lining fabric out of the 2 pillowcases, and for the front lining, I'm only cutting out like the side seam to side seam distance from the pillowcases. We're using the regular bedsheet fabric for lining the ties. All right, now we gotta take this bit that we took from the top of the sheet bottom of the sheet, whichever really, and we got to make the ties. I'm going to cut this in half and only use a quarter of this edge, well, half of this edge, and make my ties only this long instead. Yeah, the full length of the bed sheet was going to be just too much, so I cut them in half and cut them in half the long way, and then folded those 4 pieces I got in half and sewed them on the sewing machine to make tubes. Turned the tubes right side out, ironed with my flat iron from college, and we had our shoulder ties. Off camera, I already sewed together the lining for the ties to the lining of the bodice, so now it's all one big piece, and you can really see the color difference here between these 2 pieces. This is why I did the lining for the ties still out of the actual tie fabric. Here's the ties, and we are now going to sew the bodice together, basically from here all the way around to here. So we need to put the ties in at the top so they get caught in the sewing. I put these points on there, so I'm gonna sew it so the points are pointing outwards. To make sure they don't get caught in anything, I'm going to like pin these ties to the lining. Now I need to go and pin the top part, which is here. This is right side facing up. This needs to be right side facing down so that the right sides are facing each other, and when we bag this around, it'll be laying how it's supposed to. I used a lot of pins here, and I also added some points to the ties just because I thought maybe it would reduce the bulk and make it look a little bit nicer. Something that I want to mention is 1, I'm using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and 2, if I was doing this properly, I would start at the V-neck and work my way out, but I don't feel like doing that. The third thing is that for these ties here, when I hit the tie, I'm just gonna go straight across like that instead of doing the actual point. On my dinosaur dress, I just went straight across, like between these 2 points here, where like where this lines up, where this starts and where this ends, like straight across between my fingers there. I just did that, and that worked perfectly fine for my dinosaur dress, so I'm just going to do it the same way here. So I started bag lining this whole thing and sewing the lining on, and then my camera crapped out. Oh, that's frustrating. All right, anyway, here you can see where my like sewing lines are for the ties, there and there, and then here for these ones where I went straight across. I'm going to trim all these corners so I can more easily turn this right side out and then top stitch it as well. Good evening. The lighting is different, that's all. Anyway, while working on the front bodice, this is the part of the show where we remember that boobs exist, and some people might want a bit more shaping to their front bodice than others. Don't get me wrong, the ties around the waist do a lot of the bodice shaping work for you, but some people, me included, might want to put in some darts. This is the front bodice of the dinosaur dress, and you can see I put 2 darts in both the lining and the actual proper front of the dress too, but you can see it better on the lining. And I put these darts starting right below like my nipple, because I don't know about you, but darts that end right at the nipple, like just, it stands out so much more to me. I don't know, I can't do it. I've nursed babies, I can't do it anymore. I have the darts that I'm doing on this purple dress marked out with pins. So here's the top point, and here is the 2 parts that I am going to be gathering together and then sewing down to the top point and making a nice and beautiful dart, and I have it marked on the opposite side as well. So we're going to put in these darts before turning the whole bodice front right side out and ironing and top stitching. After I sewed all 4 darts, I had a nice fight with the front bodice in order to turn it right side out, and then I ironed everything that I had just sewed nice and flat. Bodice complete. Well, okay. We're probably going to do some top stitching actually along this top edge just to keep things nice and flat up here. That's what I did on the dinosaur dress too. But we are going to move on the back bodice. I did some wonderful for myself pre-planning off screen. I already have my ties pinned in just like how I did the ties on the front bodice. They're pinned in up here so that they line up with this corner here, with a little bit of seam allowance, a tiny bit of seam allowance, whatever. And then I also have, we can look over here, some loops pinned in to be sewn in on this edge as well for the lacing. So now we get to sew around. Instead of where the front bodice was like starting here and going all the way around, I'm only going to sew from this end with the loops to the other end with the loops. And that's because we need to be able to add pockets to this. And I'm not quite sure how big the pockets are yet because I haven't made them. Let's go sew this and iron it and perhaps actually put purple thread in my machine so I can top stitch it. Just kidding, the purple thread is going on now because I don't have enough of the white thread left on my bobbin. Jalen, why did you do this to yourself? Why did you pin things the wrong direction? After sewing around the 3 sides of the back bodice and making sure the loops all got sewn in correctly, I had to turn the whole thing right side out and iron it again. Next, we're going to iron this nice and flat, and then we're going to top stitch along the edge that we just sewed. This will help to anchor the loops, and it'll also help keep things nice and flat and not have the lining shift around. After ironing down the back bodice, I went and top stitched down the entire area that we had just sewn, and then I also went back and did the top stitching at the top of the lining for the front bodice as well, so that would also be held nice and flat. I did not top stitch down the ties for the front bodice. We now have a front bodice and a back bodice. It is now time to work on the skirt and the pockets. The first tier of the skirt of our dress is a circle skirt, and circle skirt math is fortunately very straightforward. We're using this equation from geometry class. The circumference equals 2 pi r. The circumference is going to be our waist measurement that we measured earlier. For me, it was 32 inches, so I plug that number in. Then you've got 2 multiplied by pi, just use 3.14. It'll get you close enough. And then r, which is the radius of the little circle that we're going to need to be able to cut out the waistline of our circle skirt. That ends up being r equals 5.09 for me. I'm going to actually round up to 5.25 inches just to make measuring more easy, and also so I have a little bit of leeway to finish my seams and finish my edges by like folding them over or something. I think that's gonna work better. That 5.25 gets us our little circle radius here. I'm actually going to use 20 inches for the radius for my big circle for this first tier of the skirt. That's because 15 inches from my natural waistline makes a pretty good like mini skirt height skirt on me. If you want this first tier to be longer or shorter, you just change the radius of this big circle as you see fit. Do keep in mind seam allowance. Never forget seam allowance. Let's see here. So I have a fold here, and I also have a fold here. This is 4 layers of fabric. So I only need to measure out 1/4 of a circle on here. And because of this fold over here, I will end up with the 2 half circles that I need. Just as a reminder, we are making a full circle skirt here. That is how the math that I did works. Anyway, we're cutting out the big donut of fabric. We should end up with half circle and another half circle. And there's our circle skirt here. I am going to do a very small, like teeny tiny rollover on these edges just to try and take care of some of the fraying, and then we will cut out some pockets. As you might be able to tell from my face, it is too hot outside. It is too hot in my house, and it is getting late. So before doing a sewing mistake, I'm gonna go to bed, and I will see you in the morning. I lied, and by that I mean I cut out the pockets and also hemmed these edges for the pockets before going to bed. But we are going to sew these together with some French seam nonsense that I didn't want to do at 11 o'clock at night. If you don't want to do that, don't bother. We're going to sew the pockets together. Then we're going to sew them to the circle skirt for the back bodice. Then we are going to take that whole thing and we're going to sew it to the back bodice. So that's the game plan. I sewed that on the wrong side. Sewing mistakes are going to happen whether I went to bed or not. All right, new pocket piece cut out and started. Probably should be ironed, but oh well. We need to sew this edge and this edge to the skirt. So I, for French seaming stuff, am going to be sewing from the long side, like the longer pocket edge, sewing down and around. This is the part where I mentioned that the dinosaur dress is made out of microfiber because I was silly and thrifted a microfiber sheet and don't know when to give up. This fabric is something like 62% cotton, 38% polyester, and even though it still has a good chunk of polyester in it, it is still so much more easier to work with than the microfiber was. If you can't find straight 100% cotton bed sheets, then find something that's at least majority cotton, because this is still leagues better to work with than the microfiber was. There, we have pockets. Every time I say, oh no, I don't have to iron it, I'll be fine, French seams come and humble me. So, you know, maybe iron your stuff if you're gonna do this. But anyway, now we need to sew this onto the skirt. You see how my pocket right now is like open on this side? This side is what we are sewing to the skirt, and sewing it to the skirt will close it up and make it a full pocket. I need to put it right sides together with the skirt. And then this one will be for this side of the skirt here. That way it's sewed down, it'll be like this. And since this is the back skirt, this will wrap around to the front and be front pockets. Pocket, circle skirt, other pocket. First we're gonna find the middle. It's matched up right sides together to the outside of the back bodice. Right there. Line this up with the rest of the back bodice. If you'll notice, the lining is still completely free. I didn't pin any of this down, but we are going to sew from this side. We're going to sew the pocket and the skirt and the other pocket all the way down the front of the dress. And look at these pockets. Oh, they're going to be great. Just need to sew down the lining. You could do it by hand, you could do stitch in the ditch, however seems to work best for you. If you're making this dress, when you do the top stitching for the bodice, don't take it all the way to the corner here. Leave a gap. It will make this buckling here, it won't happen. This is a tutorial, but your dress will likely be better than mine. Yeah, we're gonna stitch in the ditch for this. I'm really tempted to just top stitch this in instead of doing it properly like on the back. And let me show you why. When I bag lined the front of this bodice, I sewed all the way around, right? I went too close in on this side so that this line of stitching here is way too close to here, and I didn't leave a big enough gap still to be able to do what I did on the back bodice. And you see it's sewn like right up to where I have this pinned in. 15. So I left a 15-inch gap when it really should have been a 16-inch gap for my actual waist measurement. Really, it should have been like a 17-inch gap to leave enough space to sew this skirt in properly. So we're just gonna sewing gremlin it and top stitch the skirt in. I top stitched from the front side to attempt to make that side be nicer looking. And if we look on the back, I had pinned the lining in as well, like folded it under. And other than this little section over here, the lining all caught. So I can just come back and hand sew this little section. That's fine. That's still way better than hand sewing this entire thing in because I messed up. Now's the time for the two parts of our dress to become one dress. One total dress. We're going to do that by sewing the side seams of the circle skirt, so we effectively will have like a mini dress going on. We're going to sew part way up the sides, probably overlapping with the pockets just a little bit, because on my dinosaur dress, I left way too big of a gap at first and I had to go back and fix it. So I know that I need to go part way up to like here-ish is where the split is pretty good for me, but for you it might be different. So you might need to pin your pieces together and then try it on and make sure that the actual split is where you want it to sit. Here I have the back of the dress, right side up. We're going to take the front of the dress and put it right side down so that the right sides of the dress are facing each other. We're going to double check that this is all hanging level and would be even. Here is my starting point. And I'm going to sew along where the pocket sits, all the way down this side seam. So we have one big circle for our circle skirt. I'm going to feel where the stitching for the pocket is and go right next to it. One seam, which looks like this. Since we have a actually put together dress now, we can try it on. So I have a length of ribbon here. I'm using the back ties to hold the dress up while I put the lacing on. So let's do that real quick. I have it sitting kind of under my bust how I wanted. Boom, there we go. And then bring the front up, put the V-neck where we want it, give it a bow. I found with the dinosaur dress, I can tie the shoulder ties and then just undo the waistband stuff and leave the shoulder ties as they are. And I don't have to tie the shoulder ties every time. Pull this in, give it a great big bow at the back. I like the pointed tails there for the bow. That's fun, that's cute. There we go. That is our purple mini dress. Our pockets are right there, easily accessible. Can fit my entire hand in there. That is so nice. That is so snazzy. This is also just a really cute dress. My darts got a little wonky there. I might need to steam it or like take it out or something, because they're definitely sitting not how I wanted them to. I think this is tied a little high, to be honest. Looking at the skirt length, it looks higher up in the front than in the back. I know this looks like a lot of numbers. Please bear with me, because we are effectively now just doing a gathered skirt kind of technique. To explain the dinosaur dress more in depth, I made that dress out of 2 bed sheets that were both 64 inches wide. And that 64-inch thing kind of determined how many panels of fabric I had to use to achieve a fantastic gathered result. Tier 1 was just a circle skirt, the same as you just saw me make and put on the purple dress. Tier 2 is a rectangle gathered down to fit the hem of that circle skirt. And I used 4 panels of my 64-inch wide fabric. That came out to 256 inches, which when you divide that number by 126 inches, the hem of the circle skirt, you get just a teeny tiny bit more than 2. So that meant that that panel was gathered down like a 2x gather to be able to sew it to the circle skirt. And I did that by running 4 gathering lines, 1 in each panel, to make it easier to be able to gather it down rather than trying to like gather the whole thing and disperse the gathers evenly. Tier 3 was just a ruffle. It was only about 5 inches tall, and instead of 4 panels, I used 6 panels to get a 1.5 times sort of gather for the ruffle. And the 6 panels was really long, but again, I did 6 gathering lines to do it panel by panel to make it easier. So let's talk about the game plan for the purple dress. The purple dress's bed sheet is 104 inches wide, which means that I should be able to use less panels and still get the same result because it's a lot bigger. Tier 1 is the same as Tier 1 with the dinosaur dress. Same circle skirt, same measurements. The hem is 126 inches. Tier 2 will be 15 inches tall, and then seam allowance will knock that down just a little bit. Because of the extra length in the width, I'm only going to be using 2.5 panels, which will get me 260 inches of material, which is still that roughly 2x gathered measurement. So the next tier should be fairly similar in looks to the dinosaur dress. Tier 3 is the ruffle. I'm only going to use 4 panels for this one, but 4 panels will give me the longest ruffle between these 2 dresses because it will give me 416 inches of ruffle. I cut out the 2.5 panels required for the second tier of the skirt. Then I sewed them together into a very big circle. Then I split that circle into 5 total sections to add 5 gathering lines. I measured out 5 equal sections on the circle skirt, then actually sewed in a gathering line into each of the 5 sections on the big circle, pinned my massive circle to the circle skirt, matching up all those sectioning marks, and gathered it down to fit. It's entirely pinned on, and it's kind of reminding me of those like giant mushroom hats that people wear to like run fairs or for cosplays and stuff. And now it must be sewn. This thing's huge, so it's time to break out the sewing machine extension table that my husband made for me. Please don't let the time lapse fool you, because slow and steady is the name of the game here. You can see how much time in this time lapse I'm actually sewing and how much time I'm spending adjusting the fabric and making sure everything is laying how it's supposed to. That's on purpose. That's to make sure that I don't sew things incorrectly or improperly. Let's trim some threads and do this whole thing again for the ruffle for the bottom. I know what I said before, but we're going to do 5-inch panels for the ruffles instead of 6. I am not sewing the ruffle into a big circle. I'm just, executive decision, I'm not doing it. I'm going to put probably at least 2 sections for the gathering in each of my ruffle panels. And then I'm going to pin it on here, sew it on here, with plenty of extra left off the edge so that I can just sew the seam allowance when I'm done before I hem the whole dang thing. Because this is over 400 inches of ruffle, and I don't want to deal with that as a big circle. The second tier was bad enough as it is. I'm not doing it. I don't want to. You don't have to if you don't want to. We have 4 panels for the ruffle. I put 2 sections of gathering into each panel, and then I spent a while on the floor lining up all the sections to pin it onto the actual skirt. I haven't played volleyball since like middle school, but I should really get some of those knee pads because this kitchen floor could really use it. Again, do not let the time lapses fool you. This took forever. I think I spent an hour on the floor just gathering down all the panels and the sections and making sure that this ruffle was pinned on how I wanted it to be before sewing the whole dang thing on. It is 11 o'clock at night. There is no way I am ironing this hem before I hem it. I'm not. After some incredibly poor posture while refilling my bobbin thread for like the 50th time, I just did a double fold hem for the hem and just ran it on through. The dress is done. Let's just smash cut to pretty dress time, shall we? And that is how I made my highly adjustable, highly whimsical, split side, beautiful dress. And I'm so happy that I now have 2 of them. I will say I do think that a busy pattern will hide any sewing mishaps a bit easier. Do keep that in mind, I guess. Oh, and this is about how much fabric I have left of the pillowcases and the bed sheets. So I put a lot of the bed sheet into this. I had enough fabric to make a hair bow, which you saw in the finished shots there. But for the most part, that bed sheet went entirely into this dress. If you enjoyed this video, please, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more stuff like this. Check out my previous video where I did a tutorial on how I made a massive adult-sized fleece cloak. Maybe don't wear it right now though. You'd probably get heat stroke, and I wouldn't want that to happen to you, and I don't think you'd want that to happen either. So, goodbye!